Let me ask you something that most people never actually really stop to think about. Do you actually know where you stand financially? Not just how much you make, but where that puts you in comparison to everyone else. Because here's the truth, you might be doing better than you think, or you actually might be way behind and not even realize it. Most people, they fly by the seat of their pants when it comes to money. We hear things like top 10% or millionaire tossed around like it's candy. But no one ever really tells you what those numbers actually are. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the real stats, what it actually takes to land in the top 25%, 10%, 5%, and even 1% in both net worth and income in Canada and the US. And I want to talk to you about where most people actually sit and what it takes to climb those ranks. Because the real gap is not between the rich and the poor, it's actually between the people who earn money and the people who know how to keep it, grow it, and make it work for them over time. So I pulled all the most up to date numbers for 2025, and I'm going to break it all down for you step by step so you can actually see where you fit in. And if you stick around till the end, I'll show you exactly what really moves that needle because this isn't just about figuring out where you are today. It's actually more about what you can do to start moving up those ranks and build the kind of wealth that actually lasts. The first rule of investment is don't lose money. The second rule is don't forget the first. See, Buffett wasn't just talking about investing, he was actually talking about your whole financial life. So, before we go deeper, let's quickly define a few things because it's going to help you understand exactly where you stand. When it comes to your net worth, I'm talking about everything that you own minus everything that you owe. So, when I talk about assets, those are things that actually add to your net worth. That's the equity in your home, the cash that you've saved, your TFSA RSPs, if you're Canadian like me, or Roth IRA or 401k if you're in the US, and then just your investments, your index funds, ETFs, dividend stocks, GICs, your pension value if you happen to have one, and anything else that holds real financial value. And when we talk about liabilities now, this is anything that pulls the number down. So that could be your mortgage balance, any credit card or consumer debt, car loans or leases, student loans, personal loans or lines of credit, and anything else that you owe money on. So when you take all those assets and you subtract out the liabilities, that's your true financial position. That's your net worth. And when we look at income in this video, I'm going to be talking about gross income. That's basically before taxes, because that's how these percentages are measured in both Canada and the US. And also note for net worth, I'm also going to be using 2025 estimates, right? And for income, I'm going to be using percentile data that comes from the latest official releases available. So that's what I'm going to be using. Now, before we jump into the top brackets, I really want to lay out the groundwork for a second because when people hear top 25% or top 10%, they actually don't know what the middle actually looks like. I want to kind of give you that baseline. Now in Canada, the typical household sits around roughly 500,000 in net worth and about 70,000 in household income. In the US, the middle looks closer to about 195,000 in net worth and about 75,000 in household income. So if you're somewhere in those numbers, you're basically in the middle of the pack. You're not ahead and you're not behind. You're just average, right? Because now when we talk about the top 25%, the 10%, the 5%, and even 1%, you'll actually feel the distance between each gap. And when you see these numbers side by side, things will start to click, right? You'll see people earning 200,000 who still feel stressed and others making far less that land comfortably in the top 25%. So that's what I want to show you when it comes to this breakdown. Not just who earns the most, but who's actually building wealth quietly and in the background. All right, so let's just get into it. Top 25% net worth and income in Canada and the US. See, a lot of people think that they're in the top 25%, but when you look at the real numbers, most folks are actually nowhere near close because this is the bracket where most people they feel like they're doing okay when they're not really wealthy and they're not really struggling, just somewhere in the middle, right? But here's the honest, brutal truth. The top 25% is actually a lot higher than most people think. To be in the top 25% here in Canada, for example, you need a household net worth of around 550,000 to 650,000. And remember, that's total net worth. So that's your home equity, your savings, your investments, everything, right? A lot of Canadians hear that number and they'll think, there's no way I'm even close to that. But if you've been paying down your mortgage, you have some assets in your RRSPs or TFSA, and more importantly, you've been avoiding crushing debt, you might actually be closer than you realize. Now, in the US, that number jumps up a bit. For 2025, that top 25% sits at around 659,000 per household net worth. That difference mostly comes from bigger retirement accounts and home values from several fast-growing states. So, if you're Canadian watching this, don't compare yourself directly to the US because they're totally different economies, right? Now, let's layer in income because that's where things really start to surprise a lot of people. Now, for Canadians landing in the top 25% of income earners, you need a household income of about 100,000 to 110,000, which means a dual income family with two average salaries can honestly get there. In the US, the top 25% income earners, they started around a household income of about 120,000 to 130,000. That doesn't mean rich, right? Because this is where people start to feel like they're having a little bit more breathing room. But let me tell you something. Even at that level, a lot of households, they still feel behind, especially now in 2025, because of groceries, gas, housing, kids' activities, and a life in general, right? Cost of living in cities is crazy right now. And all of it eats away at your margin pretty quickly. And that's why some people in the brackets, they still feel stressed, while others feel fine, even though their numbers look very, very similar. Because here's the thing, it comes down to your systems, your habits, and your actual spending guardrails. So if you really want to know where you stand financially, you have to start calculating your net worth, list your assets, list your debts, and then just subtract it. And I promise you, this one exercise and number will give you so much more clarity than any sort of paycheck ever will. So now that you know where the top 25% actually really sit, let's step into the group that most people think that they understand, but very few actually do, the top 10%. The top 10% net worth and income in Canada and the US. See, the jump from the top 25% to the top 10%, it's actually a lot bigger than most people think. This is where things start to feel a little differently because it's not flashy, it's not rich, but it's stable, right? It's steady. Like you finally have some margin in your life. See, for most people, this is the level that they can imagine when they think comfortable, right? So they have a decent home, money going into their savings, fewer emergencies that could actually derail their life. But the numbers honestly might surprise you. See, to be in the top 10% in Canada, you're looking at a household net worth of around 1 million to 1.2 million. Now, before that number scares the crap out of you, just remember what actually goes into it. So, a home that you've been paying down for years, your RSP or your TFSA, maybe even a workplace pension, and a couple of steady investment accounts. Honestly, it really adds up faster than you think. So, for many Canadians, especially homeowners outside of Toronto or even Vancouver, this is honestly more reachable than it sounds. So, in the US, the top 10% sits a little higher. So, the newest 2025 estimate puts it at around 1.6 million household net worth. A big reason for that gap, it's because Americans typically have larger retirement accounts, and real estate in many states have grown aggressively since 2020. So if you're Canadian watching this, don't compare yourself directly to US numbers, because honestly, they're two very different financial ecosystems. Now, let's talk income and layer that in because this is where the shock hits most people. To be in the top 10% of earners here in Canada, a household needs around 115,000 to 120,000 of income. Now, this might honestly surprise a lot of people because this number, it isn't huge, right? Because a couple each earning around a national average can honestly land there. Now in the US, that top 10% household income sits a little higher at 180,000. So again, they're two very different landscapes. But here's the thing, even a top 10%, a lot of people, they still feel stretched, right? mainly because of bigger homes, have maybe even having two cars, the kids' sports, the insurances. Honestly, it all really starts to add up, right? So some families earning well into six-figure territory, they still feel like they're treading water, while others earning far less, they feel calm and in control. So why is that? Honestly, it's because it's not just about the numbers that you earn, it's about your systems, the margin that you build, and your behavior towards money in general. This is honestly the bracket where people either build wealth quietly or they drift into lifestyle inflation without even noticing. So, as an actionable step, I want you to do a quick check in this week. So, look at your last 90 days of spending, and then I want you to ask yourself one simple question: is my lifestyle rising faster than my income? Now, if that answer is yes, you need to start pulling things back potentially before that gap becomes completely unmanageable. So that's the top 10%. But the next level, that's where the separation really starts, right? Because the top 5%, they don't just earn differently, they think differently too. So let's break that down next. The top 5% net worth and income in Canada and the US. See, when you step into the top 5%, you're entering a whole different category. This is the point where wealth doesn't just happen, it's built on purpose. Most people think the difference between the top 10% and the top 5% is income, but it's not. It's intention, it's planning, and it's choosing margin over lifestyle. So let's walk through those numbers so you can see where this level actually really sits. So in Canada, being in the top 5% means having roughly 2.1 million to 2.3 million in household net worth. And again, this isn't just cash. A big part of that number is a paid off or nearly paid off home, a strong RRSP, and a fully maximized TFSA, and possibly even a pension if you're fortunate enough to have one nowadays. And a lot of Canadians who've lived in the same house for over 20 years, especially in Ontario and BC, have honestly quietly drifted into this category without even realizing it. And in the US, the top 5% sits even higher, right? The latest 2025 estimates put this group at around 3.5 million household net worth. And once again, higher retirement counts and certain real estate markets push that number even higher. So Canadians, again, don't compare yourself directly to US totals because they're completely different financial landscapes. Now, I want to talk about incomes because this is where the separation honestly becomes crystal clear. Now, to reach the top 5% earners here in Canada, a household needs around 180,000 to 200,000 in gross household income. That's usually a skilled dual income household or one high skilled income plus a second moderate income. Now, in the US, the top 5% household income is around 250,000 to 280,000. So again, the gap, it's real, right? So here's what I want you to see. At the top 10%, stability, it starts to form. But the top 5%, people start making completely different decisions. They're not asking, can I afford this? They're actually asking, does this move me forward instead? See, they build buffers like fully funded emergency funds. They keep their overhead low relative to their income, and they automate their investing so they don't rely on luck or windfalls. In other words, wealth at this level, it's intentional. It's not accidental. So that's the top 5%. But the next level, that's where things get really extreme, right? Because the top 1%, they don't just earn differently this time. They operate on a completely different financial system. So let's break that down next. But before we jump into the top 1% numbers, if this video is honestly helping you see wealth a little differently, or you're just finding it super insightful and entertaining, do me a quick favor, tap subscribe or even hit the like button if you haven't already. It's totally free. It takes a literal second and it helps this channel reach more people who are trying to build real wealth the slow, steady, and intentional way. So to thank you, here's a crab armed with discipline and a reminder that progress doesn't always look pretty, but it has to get done, right? I appreciate you being here. Now let's get back to it. Top 1% net worth and income in Canada and the US. See, when people hear top 1%, they usually picture yachts, private jets, and billionaires. the real 1%, it actually looks way more ordinary than people expect. So let's talk about what it actually takes to land in the top 1%, because this is where the numbers really finally stop being abstract. So in Canada, to be in the top 1%, you're looking at roughly 6.5 million to 7 million in household net worth. And here's what's important to understand. Again, most of this isn't just sitting in cash. It's usually a fully paid off home, long-term investments, business equity, and decades of compounding. So a lot of people in this group, they didn't just get rich fast, right? They started investing early, avoided big mistakes, and let time basically do all the heavy lifting for them. So in the US, the top 1% threshold, it's a lot higher, right? So for 2025, the estimate sits at around 13 million household net worth. That number gets pushed way up because of massive equity markets, business ownership, and concentration of wealth in certain areas and states. So again, Canadians watching this, I want to make it clear, don't compare yourself directly to the US totals, right? Because they're two totally different systems and totally different realities. Now let's talk about incomes, because this part will actually really surprise you. So to be in the top 1% of income earners in Canada, a household needs around 350,000 to 400,000 in gross income. But here's the thing, being in the top 1% of income doesn't automatically put you in the top 1% of net worth. Plenty of high earners still feel trapped, right? Because of big mortgages, big taxes, and big lifestyles. So in the US, that top 1% household income starts at around 750,000 to 800,000. That's honestly a massive income. But here's the mistake a lot of people make, right? They assume having a high income equals wealth. But here's the thing, it doesn't. See, you can earn a ton of money and be income affluent, but still be asset poor. And this isn't just my opinion, right? It's been studied for decades. The book, The Next Millionaire Next Door, the research shows something really uncomfortable with this. Many high-income households never build lasting wealth. Not because they didn't earn enough money. It's because they spend what they earn, right? And as income honestly goes up, lifestyle creep and lifestyle goes up with it in most cases. So bigger homes, nicer cars, more pressure to look successful. Meanwhile, a lot of real millionaires earn far less because they save consistently, invest patiently, and don't feel the need to advertise it on social for validation. So income can open up that door, but it doesn't do that work for you. Your assets do, and so does your discipline. See, the top 1% isn't defined by spending and having flashy stuff. It's defined by ownership of businesses, real assets, investments held for a really long time. Most people in this group live well below what their income allows, and they protect their downside, and they avoid those big mistakes. But most importantly, they let time do what time does best. They're not chasing status. They're playing the long game. So now that you've seen the full picture, the top 25%, the top 10%, 5%, and even 1%, the biggest takeaway? Wealth isn't about jumping brackets overnight. It's about building systems and staying consistent and letting time work in your favor. So remember, wealth doesn't just grow because people earn more. It grows actually because they build better systems for themselves. You can see this on all the different kinds of levels, right? From the top 25% all the way up to the top 1%. It's not just about chasing a number. It's about how you use what you already make. It's a game where net worth matters more than your income, and asset ownership matters more than appearances, and your margin matters more than your lifestyle. That's the real difference between people who stay stuck and people who quietly move up over time. And once you see the brackets this way, it's a game changer. So here's something that I wish somebody had told me earlier in my life. The numbers aren't hidden. They're just rarely explained. Because everything around us, right? Everything around us, it tells us to focus on income, to upgrade, to consume, to keep up. But real wealth, it moves a lot slower than that. It's built quietly, in your habits, in your discipline, and through the systems that you stick with over a long period of time. So if this video helped you understand where you actually stand with your net worth and your income across those different kind of brackets, I want you to go watch this next. what 1 million really looks like in Canada and in the US. So in that video, I break down where millionaires actually sit, how much of that wealth is real usable money, and why 1 million doesn't always mean freedom, right? And once that clicks, your entire definition of wealth really starts to change. So thanks so much for watching. Stay humble, stay in the black, and I'll see you in the next one.